Vitamin D is the most talked about vitamin across almost every online platform. You'll hear claims that most adults are deficient in vitamin D, and that you need it for bone health, immune function, energy levels, and even hormone balance. And this has led many people to say that vitamin D is the most important vitamin. And although it's kind of hard to pick the most important vitamin, vitamin D definitely does have some unique properties and functions. Like it's one of the only vitamins that our body can synthesize on its own by simply walking out into the sun. And in many cases, it actually behaves more like a hormone than a vitamin. But does that mean all the claims made about vitamin D are true? Well, today we're going to find out by discussing how the sun actually stimulates vitamin D production, how you also need your liver and kidneys to help activate it, what we really know about the functions of vitamin D, whether most people are truly deficient, and of course, if we should be supplementing with it. It's going to be a radiant one. So let's jump into this anatomical and physiological awesomeness. Now, one of the characteristics of vitamin D is that it is a fat-soluble vitamin. Fat-soluble vitamins dissolve in fats and tend to accumulate more in the body, as compared to, say, like the water-soluble vitamins, such as vitamin C. And as an FYI, there are 4 total fat-soluble vitamins: vitamin A, D, E, and K. Now, there are many compounds that belong to the vitamin D family, but by far the most important is vitamin D3, also known as cholecalciferol. Now, this can be synthesized in the skin, but we need UV light to do it, specifically UVB light. So let's use this skin dissection to help us with this. Here I'm tracing the top layer of the skin called the epidermis. But if you take a look at this cut edge right there, the majority of that cut edge is actually the second layer down called the dermis. It's just this top paper thin area, or this top paper thin layer, that is the epidermis. And the epidermis contains a compound called 7-dehydrocholesterol. And this acts as a precursor molecule to vitamin D3. When the UVB light comes down and hits the epidermis, the 7-dehydrocholesterol gets converted to vitamin D3. And so in theory, we could get all the vitamin D3 that we needed with enough UVB exposure, but we can also get it from our diets. Granted, there's not a ton of foods that are just packed with vitamin D3, but you can find it in fatty fish or fish oils, and also in some of our fortified products. Like we've fortified a lot of our dairy products, such as milks, and even fortified things like orange juice. And you can even get it through supplementation. And so right now, we can already address how people can become deficient in vitamin D3. Either you don't get enough in your diet, or you don't get enough through sun exposure. And that can be especially true if you live in the northern hemisphere, where you can experience those gnarly winters where the days get shorter and you're inside more. Or if you simply just don't go outside very much, which can happen a lot with elderly people who just stay inside the majority of the day. And aging itself can also make this process of converting vitamin D3 in the skin a little less efficient. But something else that is very interesting to note is that people with darker skin pigmentation often require more UVB exposure to produce the same amount of vitamin D3, because the increased melanin in the skin can reduce UVB penetration into the epidermis. And so people with darker skin pigmentation can be at greater risk for vitamin D3 deficiency. And we'll actually get into how to know if you're vitamin D deficient and some of the potential negative consequences of deficiency a little bit later on. So we've got this vitamin D3, or cholecalciferol, that was either synthesized in the skin or ingested through our diet with food or supplements. But this is still not considered the fully activated form of vitamin D. It actually has to go through a few more conversion steps. That vitamin D3, whether it was ingested or synthesized in the skin, is going to be circulating throughout the bloodstream, and it will eventually pass through this organ that you can see here called the liver. Within the liver, that vitamin D3 gets converted into something called 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, which is also the major circulating form of vitamin D that doctors commonly measure when checking your vitamin D levels. And I'll explain why that is in just a second, because even at this point, we are still not at the fully activated form yet. We've still got one more major conversion step to go. And the next conversion actually takes place in the kidneys. So now we have this 25-hydroxycholecalciferol that was converted in the liver from that vitamin D3, and this will continue circulating throughout the bloodstream and again eventually pass through the kidneys. And here you are looking at a frontal section of a kidney, and that 25-hydroxycholecalciferol is going to go through these blood vessels that you can see branching through the kidney, and it will eventually make it to the outer portion of the kidney called the renal cortex. And within the renal cortex are these tiny little tubules called proximal convoluted tubules. And inside those tubules, under the influence of a hormone called parathyroid hormone, the kidney will complete the final conversion into something called 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. The name just keeps getting longer. But now we finally have the fully active form of vitamin D that can now start exerting its effects throughout the body. But I do want to come back to that parathyroid hormone that I mentioned. If I go to this other dissection, here is the trachea, or what we refer to as the windpipe. And here above the trachea, you can see the larynx, which we nickname the Adam's apple. So me touching right here would be the same as me touching right here on myself. But I want to reference this structure below the larynx called the thyroid gland. Now, attached to the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland are these tiny little structures called parathyroid glands. You can't really see them on this dissection, but the parathyroid glands secrete parathyroid hormone. And parathyroid hormone plays a major role in regulating calcium levels within the bloodstream. One of the ways it does this is by signaling to the kidneys to complete that final activation step of vitamin D that we just talked about. But you might be initially thinking here, well, that was parathyroid hormone activating vitamin D. What does that have to do with calcium? Well, a very important function of vitamin D, specifically this now activated form, 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol, is to help with the absorption of calcium. Without it, you can only absorb a limited amount of calcium. So if we come over to this other dissection that you can see of the small intestine, and you can see the inside lining, at least we cut a window to the inside lining here. And if we were to zoom into these intestinal cells, we would see that they are in charge of absorbing the nutrients that pass through the small intestine. 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol will stimulate these intestinal cells to make more calcium binding proteins. And with more of these calcium binding proteins, more calcium that is passing through the intestine will bind to and enter these cells, which then allows the calcium to enter the bloodstream. So now you know this important relationship between vitamin D and calcium, and why they are often talked about together in the health and wellness world. And there are multiple other functions of vitamin D that we want to address, as well as discuss deficiency. But first, let me just have a quick checkpoint to summarize everything that we just learned. So here on the whiteboard, we have all the conversions listed step by step. This box is representing the skin, and inside our skin, we have the 7-dehydrocholesterol. And as the beautiful rays of the sun shine upon our epidermis, that 7-dehydrocholesterol gets converted into vitamin D3. And remember, vitamin D3 is also known as cholecalciferol. Now, this is one pathway, but we can also ingest vitamin D3 through our diet. We put it into our mouths or oral cavity and swallow it down. And both of these pathways will actually end up in the same place by going to the liver. Once the vitamin D3 is in the liver, it will get converted into 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. And remember earlier I mentioned that this is the form doctors commonly measure on blood tests. And the reason for that is because this is the major circulating form of vitamin D in the bloodstream. It tends to remain in the blood much longer than the fully activated form, so it gives doctors a much better idea of your overall vitamin D3 status. Now, once we have this 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, this is going to eventually move down into the kidneys. And under the influence of parathyroid hormone, because again, the parathyroid gland is all about regulating calcium levels in the bloodstream, we'll get this final conversion of 25-hydroxycholecalciferol into the 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. And the reason there's these cute little stars here is because this is the final activated form of vitamin D. And one of the functions that we've already covered for this 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol, this fully activated form of vitamin D, is that it will act on the small intestine. And it will increase the number of those calcium binding proteins in the cells of the intestine, those cells that absorb the nutrients. And if we increase those proteins, we increase the amount of calcium that can be absorbed. And again, that's one of the main functions of vitamin D. And if the effects of vitamin D on calcium aren't amazing enough, there's also growing interest in some of the other effects vitamin D may have throughout the body. And I say may because there's still a need for more research to fully understand many of these mechanisms and how significant they are in humans. But one of the reasons researchers have become so interested in vitamin D is because receptors for the activated form of vitamin D are found throughout many different tissues in the body. For example, many immune cells actually contain receptors for activated vitamin D. And because of that, it's thought that vitamin D may play a role in helping regulate certain immune responses as well as inflammation. Researchers have also become interested in whether vitamin D levels may influence things like muscle function, mood, and even certain hormonal pathways, including testosterone. There have also been laboratory studies showing that vitamin D may influence the growth and behavior of certain cancer cells. So there are definitely some very interesting areas of ongoing research surrounding this amazing vitamin. Now, when it comes to vitamin D deficiency, one of the interesting things is that many people with mild to moderate deficiency often don't know that they're deficient because they may not have any obvious symptoms at all. But as deficiency becomes more prolonged or more severe, then symptoms can start to appear. Some people may experience things like fatigue, generalized muscle aches, muscle weakness, or just an overall feeling of not quite feeling right. And while some people report improvements in some types of symptoms after correcting a vitamin D deficiency, many of those symptoms are also fairly nonspecific and can occur for many different reasons, which is one reason why proper testing can be so important. But some of the most well-established consequences of prolonged vitamin D deficiency are related to calcium absorption and bone health. Because remember, without adequate vitamin D, we absorb calcium much less efficiently from the digestive tract. And if calcium levels in the bloodstream start to drop, the body still has to maintain those blood calcium levels because calcium is essential for many body functions, including proper muscle and nervous system function. So one of the things the body can start to do with vitamin D deficiency is pull calcium from its storage sites within the bone tissue. Over time, this can weaken bones and contribute to bone pain, fractures, osteoporosis, and a condition known as osteomalacia, which is the softening of bone tissue in adults. In children, severe vitamin D deficiency can lead to rickets, which can interfere with proper bone health and growth. So at this point, you might be wondering, okay, so how do I actually know if I'm deficient, and should I get more vitamin D? And this is where things can get a little interesting because low vitamin D levels are actually fairly common, but the exact numbers depend on how deficiency is exactly defined, because different organizations have different cutoff points. But some estimates suggest that a significant percentage of adults have low or insufficient vitamin D levels. But again, this can vary based on the cutoff used, the season, where someone lives, skin pigmentation, age, diet, body composition, and how much sun exposure someone gets. So it's probably not accurate to say that everyone is deficient, but it is accurate to say that low vitamin D levels are common enough that this is something many people should be at least aware of. And so you might wonder next, well, if low vitamin D is so common, why don't clinicians just test everyone during their annual physicals? And the answer is that routine screening for asymptomatic adults is still somewhat debated. Some medical organizations have concluded that there is not enough evidence to recommend universal screening in every healthy adult, while other clinicians may be more proactive about testing depending on someone's risk factors. But if someone does want to know their vitamin D status, the best way to determine that is through blood testing. And remember earlier when we discussed how vitamin D3 gets converted to 25-hydroxycholecalciferol within the liver? Well, this is the form clinicians most commonly measure because it's the major circulating form of vitamin D within the bloodstream, and it tends to give a good representation of your overall vitamin D status. And if somebody is found to be deficient in vitamin D, then how that deficiency is addressed often depends on the severity of the deficiency, as well as the underlying cause. Some people may simply need more dietary intake of vitamin D or more regular sun exposure, while others may require vitamin D3 supplementation, sometimes even at fairly high doses for more significant deficiencies. But there are also people who suggest that many adults should just simply take a daily vitamin D3 supplement, almost like a vitamin D insurance policy or maintenance dose. And these are typically in more modest amounts, around 1,000 to 2,000 IUs per day. The idea being that this could help prevent deficiency or potentially help cover some people with mildly low levels due to fluctuations in diet, seasons, sun exposure, indoor lifestyles, and so on. And honestly, this is not an entirely unreasonable idea. While vitamin D toxicity is technically possible because it is a fat-soluble vitamin, toxicity is relatively uncommon, and those more modest maintenance doses are generally considered fairly safe for most healthy adults. and it could possibly prevent deficiency and even correct mild deficiency. But if one chooses to do this daily maintenance dose without definitive testing beforehand, then you'd have to concede that it is a little bit of a shot in the dark because you wouldn't know your initial levels, and so it may or may not produce any benefits. I'm assuming that many of you watching our content are a little nerdy and genuinely love to learn. I'm the same way, but I'm definitely a little heavier in the biological sciences, so I love to challenge myself in other subjects, and that is why I use Brilliant. And Brilliant has upped their game yet again with an entirely new learning experience, as they now have a visual interactive tutor that sits right on the screen with you. This tutor, named Koji, can see what you're doing, draw diagrams, ask guiding questions, and adapt in real time to how you think. I've personally been using Brilliant's tutor to sharpen my geometry skills, and I've really enjoyed how the tutor walks you through problems with visual, interactive problem solving that helps concepts actually click. And if you get stuck, Koji can help you out. Hey Koji, I'm not sure what to do next.
Let's try a test point. Where should -1, -2 move to?
Another reason I think Brilliant is beneficial for our audience is that many of our viewers are interested in going into the medical field, and going into the medical field requires a lot more than just biological knowledge. You'll have to take math classes, statistics, analyze research, and develop problem-solving skills. And Brilliant is designed to help build those foundations. Their curriculum covers everything from foundational math all the way up to more advanced concepts, and it's designed by experts from places like MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. And one thing I also like is that it fits easily into everyday life. Many people are learning on their phones these days, so it's easy to jump in and practice for a few minutes whenever you have time without needing to schedule tutoring sessions. So if you want to try Brilliant's new tutor for free, go to brilliant.org/IHA, scan the QR code on screen, or click the link in the description. And right now, Brilliant is also giving our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thanks again to Brilliant for sponsoring the video, and thank you to all of you for watching and supporting our channel.